are we actually reporting on? What are the metrics? What should be considered? What you need to know when it comes to reporting? And I'm here referring to the ESRS under the CSRD. This is the general part, in which we call it cross-cutting standards here, ESRS 1 and 2. And there's this specific environment in green, S for social aspects in yellow, and the G in blue for governance. I'll cover the cross-cutting and the E here, where my basically expertise lays. However, it's a similar approach. You can see your own workforce. You need to look into accidents rate. You need to look into your worker in the value chain. You have to assess the sustainability of your suppliers and how they deal with their workers, human rights aspect, and so on. However, let's start with the general requirements. When we are talking about general requirements in disclosure, we are talking about the most important part and the biggest difference between ESIS and other kind of mandatory disclosure. We are talking about double materiality. The double materiality it's the first step when it comes to reporting, should be the first step. You look into your company's impact on nature, in nature's or nature or climate change, different aspects of that will be evaluated in financial materiality, which how these aspects are impacting your business. Therefore, it's a two-way stream that give you really a holistic understanding of your impact and how you are impacted actually. Therefore, it is really important. If you'd like to work on sustainability disclosure and strategy, I would suggest go deep into double materiality, understand how it works, because it gives a holistic understanding of what we are trying to achieve when it comes to sustainability and ESG. Well, I guess my next course would be something around double materiality, honestly. Let's see. Let's get done with this one. But this is one part. The single materiality is the financial materiality, and when it comes to other disclosure and when it comes to voluntary disclosure, we have already mentioned that this is a pre-designed questionnaire that you fill in for example, the CDP or the Sustainalytics or EcoVadis. These are all pre-designed questionnaires. But when it comes to mandatory, but under the TCFD, well, TCFD framework has specific aspect that you need to follow. You can also use GRI standard or SASB or ISSB. Yeah. What other aspects that need to be reported under the general disclosure? We are talking about the boundaries and scope. That's really important. We're talking about the sustainability strategy linkage, and that's why I actually took this part after the strategy, because I want to show you how important it is. First, the double materiality, which must be part of your sustainability strategy building. It's one important stream, and it's really important to link the disclosure with the strategy. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Governance of reporting, and here this part would be covered in the upcoming lecture in details. It's really important. Governance is what drives corporates, what drives businesses. Then we have things like sector-specific requirements. If there's any sector-specific requirements, they must be mentioned. Alignment with international frameworks, such as these frameworks in here. It would also be good to read about the problem that most people reach out. They're trying to go very deep into these standards. Honestly, you don't need every standard. You don't need to understand every standard. You just need to understand the holistic view. Understand if you are using GRI at your company, then that makes sense to dig deeper. However, if that's not the case, you don't really need to go and just keep reading about it. Just have a holistic understanding of these aspects. Consistency and comparability is important for sure. Data accuracy and assurance. This is where also a one differentiator when it comes to ESRS assurance is required under the CSRD. Now we'll talk about the ESRS E1. Well, in E1, we are covering environment. There are too many different requirements or metrics that must be reported under the ESRS, and that would depend on the materiality. So the materiality assessment you've done, the double materiality would say that you need to focus on this one, or you can forget about this one. So when we talk about climate change, we're talking about scope 1, 2, and 3. Greenhouse gas emissions, we are talking about energy consumption, renewable energy procurement. Well, energy consumption is a must to understand your scope 1 and 2. Renewable energy procurement, you need to understand what parts procurement and renewable energy on site. So energy consumption would be also splitted by source. Climate targets, adaptation, mitigation plans. These are really essential part of your reporting when it comes to the E1. When it comes to the E2 or pollution, we are talking about pollution to air, water, and soil. We are talking about hazardous substances, chemicals that are released and so on. This is also a quite good number of KPIs, depend on the industry. We're talking about water and marine resources. Here we are talking about the withdrawal of water by source. We're talking about your water consumption and discharge. And when we talk about discharge, we are talking about quality and volume. We talk about impact on marine ecosystem. And here's the intersection between pollution and water and marine, or ESRS E2 and E3 and actually E4, where we have cross linkage here. When we are talking about biodiversity and ecosystem, it's important to know that we have I mentioned it in here? The TNFD that covers some aspects in here. Well, yeah, again, when we are talking about biodiversity and ecosystems, or ESRS E4, we are focusing on our impact on protected areas and biodiversity hotspot. Here, what you need to understand that when it comes to corporates with, let's say, production sites in different areas, they need to assess these areas. Is there any protected areas in biodiversity hotspot that they need to be extra careful or to assess or to try to make sure that they aren't negatively impacting these hotspots. We talk about land use metrics such as deforestation, reforestation, and afforestation. We're talking about protecting of habitats and species. That also requires a pre-assessment by the company to understand their locations and geolocation. Are these aspects should be considered or not? And that might be part of the double materiality at the early beginning. We are talking about resource use and circular economy. This is a big one. ESRS E5, resource efficiency, material use, intensity. What type of material are you using? Is it sourced sustainably or not? Focus on material, product, circular product, what changes in the design phase, and so on. Metrics on recycled and reused materials and circular economy initiatives need to be reported in here. So it's a holistic report that includes, really, you can see that it's not one single person that can be an expert on all of these. So don't worry, you don't need to cover all these aspects, but you need to understand the part that affects you the most, or you can be a generalist and understand points from here and there based on your industry, because your industry most probably won't affect all these aspects the same level. Rather, it might be focused on climate change and water, or climate change and biodiversity, etc. So wish you the best of luck exploring these. These will be added as well, the slides for you to download. Yeah, let's get going.